will we reinvent how we fight wars? We reinvent a military? Will everything go to drones and other new technology at even a lower cost, maybe only half the military sizes? All of these important questions are actually on the table right now being discussed. So since it's being discussed in reality at the federal government, at the world government level, Randy Kirk, my friend, and I, Brian Wang, Next Big Future, will discuss this as well. Randy, you've been super on top of the transition to drones. You've said all before, and even I, Futurist, was not quite as fully bought into the drone. I think new drones are important, but to actually shift majorly to that, or to actually see the U.S. military budgets and the world budgets change on that is not something I expected. But now it's starting to happen. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, well, so yeah, I was even talking to my wife earlier today that my greatest fear, when I say greatest fear, I mean I pictured for years and years this horrible thing, which would be you're on the battlefield and you've got a little hill out there, and over the top of that hill comes Black Hawk helicopters, giant machines with all kinds of guns and missiles on them, and they're making a huge racket. And they're coming over the hill. I mean, you're so defenseless. It must be what an ant feels like, when some predator comes and starts attacking. Well, about 2 years ago, my dream changed. My nightmare changed. It was like I was watching these videos of these
Slaughter
magnificent,
bot drones.
yeah, these fire like a fireworks display, but instead of fireworks, it's all these drones, and they're
Right.
able to thousands of them in perfect harmony. I mean,
Formation, yeah.
formations, all based on AI or computer tech. And I thought to myself, okay, I have a new nightmare, and that would be 1,000 drones coming over that same hillside,
Mhm.
all weaponized.
Right.
That's like scarier than a Black Hawk.
Yeah. And
And
it actually happened in the Ukraine-Russia war, where basically it was a heavy use of drone-based warfare. We had a video where we discussed that technology in detail, where basically it's a more advanced form of artillery or something like that, because the drones could fly out 50 miles and perfectly accurately hit something, which is more than a large artillery shell could go like 10 10 kilometers, 5 miles, something like that, with any kind of accuracy. So this has already happened in the recent war of relatively advanced militaries of the Ukrainians and the Russians. And then also Israel used a lot of drones in the war in Gaza as well. So
yeah, and we've had a kind of drone for a long time. So smart weaponry, smart bombs, smart missiles. That's a kind of drone. I mean,
right.
you turn it loose, it has a certain
Navigation stuff,
navigation
intelligence,
possibilities
sensors.
that can change on the way.
Mhm.
It can avoid things, et cetera, et cetera. You've had sub what do you call it? The missiles off of the submarines, torpedoes,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Torpedoes,
that
yeah.
have had that
Cruise
same
missiles, yeah.
intelligence for
Yeah.
a very, very long time.
Mm.
And you could drop them from airplanes into the water near
Right.
your aircraft carrier, and then have it navigate as it's trying to make its hit. Well, they've just gotten way more sophisticated,
Right.
both in the air, on the land, and in sea. And of course, now we've got humanoid robots coming, and
Right.
dogs and
Right.
dogs.
So basically the shift happened for the United States during the 90s with precision warfare. Late 80s, they built it. 90s, they deployed it in the first Iraq war. So for people who don't know, we would watch, CNN or other things like that, and we get like these videos showing, hey, there's this, cruise missile or a JDAM, flying down the chimney of some building and blowing up and that kind of thing. And you have this, black and white thing because the camera, even though you had color, the footage from the missile was black and white,
Right.
and you show these explosions where you have precision hits. So the difference between regular World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War type warfare, and the first Iraq War, the 90s, the precision was that in the old wars, you dropped like a million tons of bombs, and then you'd only have 1 in 100 hits. Like when the bombers flew over some cities, they would they could be off by miles, even though they're flying over a city. Just knowing where you are, dropping stuff. Like I dropped the bomb, and it could be off, by over a mile, 2 miles. Just hit something else completely. That's why they'd have to like check back the next day. Did I hit anything? I don't know. We dropped a bunch of stuff. So the new thing was I fire missile 1 and 2, 1 and 3. I'm hitting exactly what I want to hit. It wasn't perfect, but it was way night and day, 100 times more efficient than what the old system was. And now we've gotten to another new level with very precise drones, and individual warfare. Yeah.
And so some of the recent news, I mean, I'll start with a little bit of an old piece of news. So about 18 months ago was the first time that Elon Musk said, the future of warfare is drones. And I went, see, I was right. No. But anyway, he says the future of warfare is drones. And then last November, he was, I think, talking before the Air Force Academy. And he basically started giving example after example after example of why battleships and aircraft carriers and F-35s are no longer a smart way to fight a war. I mean, they just don't make any sense because the drones can take them out.
Right. So
And then
I think he said recently that you could use a Starship to deploy 10,000, 1 million drones over location, and then they would go out and hit 10,000, 1 million targets wherever they're going over the other side.
Yeah, so you're 40 minutes away from deploying. The Starship can be there in 40 minutes anywhere in the world, and then deploy all of these drones, which would then all be separately targeted. And just like, I mean, So then the President of the United States, the most recent big news is the President of the United States gets on the phone with, I guess he's been on the phone with Putin a lot recently. I think he's already talked to Xi, and I don't know whether he's brought it up to Xi yet or whether this is just something he announced before he's talked to either one of them about it, about all three countries cutting their military budgets in half.
Right.
He's also talked about eliminating nuclear weaponry entirely.
Right. And I think those things are actually achievable for multiple reasons. So one is that with the Starship, you have something that just with kinetic energy, with no chemical explosive, no nuclear explosive, just think of one Starship. It goes to with 5,000 tons of fuel, off of the booster stage, or just going to 15,000 miles, something like that per hour, with the upper stage and 1,000 tons of fuel. It's basically concentrating that chemical energy of the fuel into kinetic energy. So now 200 tons of payload, or if you include the whole thing, 500 tons, that kinetic energy is 5 to 10 times the weight in your high explosive, your really good high explosive. And basically it'd be like, let's say 200 tons, you'd be looking at 2,000 tons of 2 kilotons of high explosive, only kinetic energy, and it could just hit, with no radiation, and just hit them. And you don't need to have any explosive. Like I said, it's more power than that, right? So in terms of like needing nuclear weapons, you don't need it because you can just with cheap rockets and just kinetic energy, you can get more destruction, and you can be more precise about it. It's just everything about it would be, in terms of destruction, easy and cheap, right? So then you don't need to spend $100 billion on a nuclear capability, right? Because this would just work better. It's just recognizing the reality of that this technology, even though your nuclear weapon can get even more explosive, the fact that you create the mushroom cloud and all that extra stuff didn't mean you had effective destruction. Right. Everyone's like, oh crap, you did that. But it's like, you still only destroyed a certain amount of stuff. So militarily, it doesn't really, you wasted a bunch of extra stuff on flash that doesn't really help you. So
go ahead.
So that's the nuclear, don't need nuclear weapons. So recognizing that that's unneeded in the new age of warfare, that you can get more destructive bang for your buck. You don't need to have this uncontrolled extra destruction, right? It's just meaningless in terms of military purposes. The other thing is that why does Russia and China and the United States all want to cut their budgets, military budgets in half, is that having standing armies of 2 million people, for the United States, for in its armies, navies, air force, combined 2 million people, China and the United States are both about the level. Russia's about a million a bit. Is that demographics are Russia and China populations are really declining. The number of births is only, like 8 million versus 20 million in China per year, 25 million. So having the extra people, spare men, young men, is none of the countries have that anymore. So keeping these extra armies within, 10, 15 years, you would have to do deep cuts anyway, right? So if like everyone does it together, then just recognizing, and also like the whole, like the Russia expending, 700,000 lives, 800,000 lives in the war with Ukraine, of which 300,000 died, is they only had like a total of like, I don't know, 4 million, 10 million men of fighting age, and then you say, oh, we can get rid of all of them. No, if you get rid of all of them, like you did in World War II, right? Then your economy is totally messed up, right? And and then for China, it's even worse because on the demographic side, they've had the one-child policy for 40 years. They lifted it, right? But the lifted only happened for the last 4 years, and then no one's really taking advantage of it, right? So then again, if they lose 100,000 people in a war with Taiwan initially, right, or even like a million, that means a million family lines ended. Two sets of grandparents no longer have anyone extending their line. The parents no longer have anyone extending their line, and this would happen a million times. They lost 4 people in some border skirmish with India, where just like they fought each other, in the Himalayas or something like that, and they had to name bridges and do stuff. Xi Jinping had to come on and apologize, like that. So it's like you're seriously saying that they will lose that many kids. And then Russia had some things where they had, Putin or other people had to come apologize. I think it was before Putin, it was the Afghanistan. They had to apologize for losing lives, and the mothers who lost children had to complain about it. They avoided that this time because they used the I think ethnic Siberians, other nationalities, not the white Russians that they cared about, right? But they're running out, right? So it's just recognizing the demographic reality that you must shrink your armies. So that's because of the nuclear, why you can cut. Go ahead. Sorry, I went on that little rant. I think you froze it, and you're moving again.
You're good.
So, yeah. So I'm done with that. You okay?
Yeah. Well, so then there's the actual battlefield situation. So Elon went on to say, he said, look, you're not going to have an infantry.
Right.
He says you can't put an infantry out there. The drones are going to be 100% effective against the military. I mean, infantry. They'll just take them all out. It'll be over before it starts. So, of course, that means if you can't have an infantry, how are you going to actually have a land battle? Well, the land battle then is going to have to be done by drones. It's magic. Look at this. I went out and changed my shirt. Well, yeah, we had technical difficulties yesterday. A lot of rain and stuff going on in California, and you're up in Northern California, I'm in Southern California, all kinds of weather. Who knows? But do you like the shirt better or less? I don't know.
Definitely an upgrade. An upgrade.
That's an upgrade. Okay. So
I kept the same shirt.
Yeah, you got the same shirt. So now that we're past that little reintroduction, there's a possibility that we will not remember, because we're both old. I'm way older than him. We may not remember exactly what we said in the first half. So if we repeat something, give us a break. Don't say too much in the comments. But where we were at the moment of leaving, at least, we've reviewed that, and we were leaving at the point of infantry being useless. In a world of drones, the infantry will be useless. Human infantry will be dead. It'll just, according to Elon, they'll just be immediately dead. The bullets will not be bullets anymore. It'll be drones, and they will have 100% accuracy immediately.
Yeah, just like Terminator 1 and 2, where you had the future war where the drones, the hunter killers are everywhere. And there they had people, trying to scramble on antennas. But the fundamental fact would be that most of them would be dead,
Yeah,
right?
just gone. Yeah. So you
Yeah,
would
just
never
gone.
put so you would never put infantry in the field anymore. So if
Right.
you eliminate the infantry, I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And the next question becomes, Brian, if you
Yeah.
don't have infantry and you're trying to fight a land battle, aren't we
Yeah.
just going to end up looking like a Star Wars? You're going to have mechanical dogs and mechanical tanks and mechanical humans, I guess, maybe
Right.
just metal fighting metal. What is the point exactly? My metal's better than your metal. I'm trying to figure this out.
Well, it goes to that it, since World War II, like one of the reasons that we have GDP. I remember talking to I think Lester Thoreau, a MIT professor of economics and stuff like that. And he said that GDP was created as a calculation of military potential.
Oh,
That basically, when you fully mobilize your economy, right, then you're basically making things, tanks, planes, and everything, which is what we did in World War II. We got up to like 40%, 50% more mobilization, right? And and that's when the U.S. was toward the end of the war, producing on the order like 20,000 tanks a year. If the war kept going, they would have had 100 aircraft carriers, right? So it would just been insane the level of production that you get, and that was 70 years ago when the economy was like 20 times smaller,
right.
right? So so then it's like so then your military potential once you have fully mobilized against another opponent is we're going to go up to as much as we can make. And you back then you had to throw a lot more people into your meat grinder, massive zone of death, but then you also had, machines and everything like that. But it was really the machines, like how many tanks do I have? And that's why people who study history, Germany lost because they didn't have much oil, right? I needed enough oil to run my tanks to do my stuff and make my tanks. And the fact that they were making great Panthers, each Panther better than the U.S. tank. But if you have 4-1, you lose. I blow away two tanks, the next two blow up my tank, right? So that's if you have things where you have even fewer people, right? Because they're not helping you anymore. You have AIs to do stuff. Then it's a full expression of my productive capacity against your productive capacity, and then my main goal is to destroy your factories and stuff,
Right.
right?
So another theory of war, though, a theory of war from all time, another theory of war is that it really depends on, just like kind of in a football game or baseball game, it's like who wants to win more, who's more willing to sacrifice. But if all of a sudden you go from half mechanized, you still got to put two or three guys in a tank today,
Yeah,
right now, two or three guys in every tank. You got to put a guy in every plane.
yeah,
But if you get to the place where every single plane or almost every single plane is a drone, and every
yeah,
tank is a drone, and every infantryman is a drone, there's no longer any esprit de corps. There's no longer any rah rah. There's no longer dying for country. I mean,
yeah,
it's just a bunch of metal
yeah,
battling it out. It would seem like it would eliminate kind of the whole idea of war.
right. And the thing is, there's other ways to have your conflict other than this violent thing, right? You can have, economic competition, which just sanctions on Iran shrank their economy by 80%. Like we cut off your ability to export oil, we could, blockade your ports, do a thing to say we'll buy your stuff. And then your economy shrinks by 5 times, right? Which, as I said before, your economy is the expression of how big your military can become when you fully mobilize. So just by some sanctions, not fighting you, you can reduce their economy by 5 times. So you reduce their military capacity by 5 times, right?
Or you do
So
it,
again,
or you do it the opposite way. So
yeah,
that's the stick, but you can
yeah,
also use the carrot. You
right,
know, you go over to Greenland and you say to those people, "We'll write you a check for $500,000 each.
yeah,
Can we have you? Can we?"
yeah,
It's like, oh,
right,
$500,000. Okay, take
right,
over. You want
right, right.
you want this ice rock? Yeah.
Right, right, and that also goes to the whole thing of like um, Brexit. UK votes themselves out of the EU union that they had joined. Merged their government. There have been plenty of attempts in Canada for Quebec to vote themselves out of Canada, right? So in the modern age, if you have much of double economies, you can say, we don't want to hang around with you, or we want to join with you. It's like you can join, reform, leave. It's just like, join a company, leave a company. It's like there doesn't have to be this, we must be together. It's like we're together when it makes sense. We're both making money. If we're not, and I don't like you, I can go over there. And the other guy can say, yeah, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Like, I don't care. Right.
And,
So,
yeah, and isn't there, and then there's another theory of war. I've
yeah,
heard this said before, where if you want to attack another country, I mean, it goes all the way back to the days of the tribes.
yeah,
There's a few left out there, but in the tribal days, if you had to have a 7-to-1 advantage in
right,
terms of your warriors. And I
right.
don't know what that advantage is because I'm not a military historian, but there's still that theory that
Three
if
to
you're
one usually. Yeah,
the 3-to-1. So if you're going to attack your neighbor, you better have a 3-to-1 advantage, apparently.
right,
Well, the only country in the world right now that really has a 3-to-1 advantage over anybody is the United States.
right.
You were telling me a little bit about our aircraft carrier capacity compared to the other countries. You want to,
Yeah. So the U.S. has 13 large aircraft carriers, Nimitz carriers, and the new Ford carriers, about 90,000 to 100,000 tons displacement, about 100 planes, fighter planes on each aircraft carrier. But the U.S. has also things called amphibious assault ships. Those things are just basically smaller aircraft carriers. And there's those, and there's some other different named things. So if you count these things that are like 30,000 tons, 20,000 tons, 40,000 tons, that can have 25 jump jets, like the F-35, they can vertically take off, which is like the old Harrier jets, they can take off vertically, right? Then you can have, jets, 30 capacity, three of those, at most four, and you have the air power equivalent of a large aircraft carrier. And the US has 20 of those. So then if you compare to any other nation, so the big bad Russia, they have how many aircraft carriers?
no, I think you told me though.
Zero. Big zero. They had one, an old one from the Soviet times, Admiral Zhukov or whatever the aircraft carrier is called, and it was breaking down all the time. So its carrier fleet involved a tugboat or two tugboats that would go around trailing it in case it broke down and they had to tow it back to the port. But then it completely broke down, and now it's not working. It's in for repairs. They're trying to fix it and stuff like that. I think it also had a massive hole in it because the reconstruction dock fell over and knocked a big hole into the top of it. So, but and then with the fire and all kinds of stuff. So, but they're still kind of using that large hull to try and rebuild it to get their one aircraft carrier up. China has three or four aircraft carriers. I'm not sure that the fourth one's fully operational or not. They
But
may be testing.
whether it's 3 or 4,
It's irrelevant. Yeah,
when you compare it to 33, we're not even talking about in the same league.
right. And two of those are really small ones. So they're of the small variety, right? 20 some planes on it. And then you have two that are a bit bigger, but not as big as the Nimitz. They're in the range of like 60 to 70,000 tons. I think the third one was like 60,000 tons, and the next one was 75,000 tons. So about half the planes of the big US ones. And
Yep.
and then British, our allies, they have like two that are like, and the I think only one of the Chinese ones will have a nuclear capability, where it's like nuclear engine, right? So that also means they go slower and blah blah blah.
So
So
what about our other enemies, North Korea and Iran?
yeah, they got nothing, right? And again, like in terms of like they have some missiles, they have some other stuff, but if the U.S. unleashed our military capacity on them, totally smoked. Iran, people would say, oh, they got 80 million people and blah, blah, blah. You hit four ports because they got to import food. They can't grow all their own food. You blow up four ports, they can't feed. So again, I don't have to go into your castle if I starve you out,
Right.
right? So they can be starved out like that. Just take out the four ports. They have to export oil, they got to import food. There's like it's so easy to beat them militarily,
All right.
right?
So if we come back around full circle here, I
Yes,
again we may be repeating ourselves, but if we come around full circle, the only country in the world that has truly overwhelming military capability and is really overwhelming is the United States. If you
right.
add in drones, which the United States is way behind on drones, we'll admit it, but it wouldn't take us long, and I'm quite confident that there's a couple of companies right now, I forget,
Anduril,
Anduril and some others that
Swarm Tech, a
that are
bunch of other, yeah.
getting into the business, and it would take no time at all to get that ramped up. That basically, why wouldn't Russia and
China,
China be very excited about the idea of cutting their military budgets in half,
right,
if it can be done in a way that everybody can realize it's really happening. They're not
right.
giving anything up. That
Yeah, so I see it progressing something like, okay, in negotiations, and you work out here's the schedule, we're going to do it. The U.S. agrees to go first, we'll cut back 10%, and then each of the other two cut back 10%, and then we do our next 10%, they do the next 10%, and then after a year, everyone's cut back down to half, right? So that way, no cheating, you do the verification, all that kind of stuff. And the thing is, at any point, okay, the other guy's starting to do a build up again, you track it, and then you build up on your own if you need to, right? But the US is also saying, okay, um, NATO allies, of which, their economies, are close to, at least over half and close to the United States when you sum them all up, Germany, France, UK, and stuff like that. So then they say, okay, you guys need to spend not 1% of your GDP, but you need to spend 2 or 3%. So then they could add in $100 billion, $200 billion spending. They're tougher, have slightly more military. But then again, it's not on the U.S. This is like goes to Trump's point about like the U.S. doesn't have to carry this all alone, and by doing it, to have that load, the U.S. is still plenty powerful and can do all kinds of attacks, and then you're not keeping a standing army and military force there all the time. And then, but you save $440 billion.
Yeah, right.
It's like, your $2.4 trillion of individual income tax. I save $440 billion. That's on the order of about 20%. Like
Yeah.
that's all the time saving 20% each and every
Every
year.
year. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So all of a sudden we have a situation where, I mean, this wasn't on anybody's radar, so to speak. Radar.
yeah.
Anyway, we have nobody. It was not part of Trump's,
Campaigning, right?
campaigning. It was nobody was talking about it, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, we have this idea, which I can't imagine, except for a few of the neocons who would be against this idea to
Right.
back the military in half. Yes, I think again, maybe there's a recession at some point because of all this cutting. Brian and others argue with me and say no chance. There's never going to be a recession because the economy is going to grow so fast that it will. But okay, we get a 6 month recession. We get a 9 month recession.
Yeah,
Does anybody remember the Bush recession? The Bush one recession?
yeah.
The Bush one
No,
recession was like 6 months. It was
yeah.
because primarily it was 50% of the reason was because we cut back the military.
Right,
Nobody remembers that recession.
right, right. And I would also say in terms of the drone thing, the U.S. is not necessarily behind in military capable drones, like the really good drones. I think their technology, the U.S. technology is better. The aspect is that China has a far larger commercial drone system, and so they can make far more drones, which potentially could be made into military ones. But Anduril, which is a new tech company making advanced drones, they have ones that are made like flying battering rams that can knock through and fly through all the commercial weak drones, right?
Wow.
So the thing is that in terms of like actual like hardcore military capability, the U.S. has advantages there. There's also the commercial wingman program where they would have the equivalent of an F-16 with an autopilot thing that would fly around, and then you would have a main plane quarterbacking a bunch of other planes. right? So that again would, if they had 4-to-1, four robot F-16s and then one not robot F-16 and F-35 or, fifth gen plane like that, they'd have a pilot quarterbacking a bunch of robot planes, which the U.S. is in the lead on developing that capability, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds to me like Trump has put forward an idea. I'm a big Trump fan, so this is not about Trump, but it's about the idea. I don't care
Right.
if this
If
idea,
Biden come up with it or,
yeah,
Kamala come
Biden,
up with it.
anybody
Yeah.
else would come up with the idea. It's like, okay, let's get rid of half the military.
Right.
I don't think we ever get rid of the whole military, but who
No.
knows? Maybe someday. Get rid of the nuclear weapons and eliminate that. I mean, in a sense, the drone thing kind of becomes the same kind of standoff as the nukes are, because if
Right.
you this kind of mechanized approach,
Yeah.
uh, I mean, it's not. It's kind of like uh, you don't want to see mechanized drones coming over the horizon.
It's basically that in World War One, no man's land, which was like between the trenches,
Right.
so 1917,
Right.
between the trenches, no person could go there because they would be machine gun, you'd be dead, right? And so you're about, 200 feet, 300 feet apart, length of a football field or something like that, right?
Right.
And then World War II, you'd have massive battle lines, and then it expanded to be about a kill zone of about, 500 yards, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so the main conflicts where you could blow back behind the lines and then come forward. So things have gotten more deadly, gotten bigger. In the Ukraine-Russia war, they were hitting people down like 20, 50 miles behind the line, right? They were like, drones, they used a lot of drones, like 100,000 drones, whatever like that, and hitting guys 10 miles, 20 miles. Like, so you expanded the zone of no man's land. So then if you make the drones even bigger, even deadlier, not just from um, a Russian military or Ukraine military that are, 4 times, 5 times weaker than China versus the United States,
Right.
right? You'd create this 200, 300 mile, wide, death zone, right?
Wow.
So that's the kind of like you make this massive area that would, if you want to visualize it, think of what the Terminator 1, Terminator 2 future war thing with, Terminators walking around, hunter killers flying overhead, and that kind of stuff, right? Missiles flying everywhere, drone killers everywhere. So you made your death zone just insanely huge. And there's no point to whether I dump 1 million guys into that zone,
Guys,
2 million guys
you
into
mean
that
1
zone.
million, you mean 1 million drones.
Right, right. Because
You're
my
not going to put any
production,
humans in there.
right. Like, why are you putting all these humans in there? Oh, I want the soldiers to go fight. Like, well, why don't you go do that?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, they say World War One. You should hop over the trench, go over the top, and then run into the machine gun. It's like, and how does running into machine gun stop anything? Right? So that's why we need to change things. Yeah.
So super interesting. We might be on the verge of, I mean, we're on the verge of so much change. It's unbelievable. The change with regard to possibly the way that we govern, the changes with regard to the way that we maybe don't pay income taxes, the change with maybe getting rid of nukes, change of maybe cutting our military in half. I mean, these are massive societal changes. And
Yeah.
here we are, right? Oh, not to mention, oh yeah, AI, robots, and cars that drive themselves. I mean, other than that, hardly anything's going on, Brian.
Right. Yeah. But it seems like it's a new world order that we're seeing. Yeah. So,
Don't call it, let's not call it that.
okay.
Can we call it the new universal methodology or something? New world
Okay.
order has negative connotations, Brian.
Okay. I mean, we pick up a new name. If you can think of a better thing to call it, put it in the comments below, and then, see. And also, why are we wrong? Why isn't this a good thing? To me, I don't see it. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's going to make us vulnerable to war. I don't think it's, the changing to drones is more inevitable, especially with really great AI.
Yes.
Like, how do you get, GPT-7, GPT-10 or Grok 11 and then not have this capability. If you have Tesla bots running around, if you have robotaxis going, how did this not happen? I don't get it, But if you know, I'd be very curious. So.
Cool. All right. Well, I don't remember whose show this is. I don't remember if this is Next Big Future or if this is Randy Kirk's videos. But
Both of us, yeah.
hey, Brian, it's been
Yeah.
great.
Great. Yes. Okay.
It's been great
Thank you.
talking to you.
Bye.